Hey, what's going on, everyone? Romeo here. In this video, I want to address three main concerns about the book Complete Spanish Step by Step. Now, I know that I'm a big fan of the book and I recommend it to others, but that doesn't mean that the book is perfect. So, I just want to address a couple of questions that I've received since I've been promoting the book. Um, one of the first questions that I received was, how do I actually go through the book? Do I recommend that you go through the book by listening to the audio version of the book first, or do I recommend that you actually go through the physical copy of the book and do the exercises first? Um, the first thing I want to say about that is I actually hesitated when I built the plan out that I recommend to others. The way the plan is written out suggests that someone actually listens to the audio version of the book first and then go to the exercises. The reason why I hesitated is because that's actually not how I prefer to learn. When I go through material, I actually prefer to do the physical copy of a workbook first, and then if there's a listening component, listen afterwards. For me, that allows me to first cement the information in my head. Like I actually am wrestling with the exercises, going through the exercises, reading it, and I am seeing what I'm actually doing. And then when I go to listen, that reinforces what I have already seen and struggled with. But the reason why I set the plan up the way I did is because there are quite literally people out there who have never heard the language spoken, or they're just not familiar with the language. So, in that case, with that person in mind, someone who is not really familiar with the language, I think is important to first listen to what you're actually hearing. Because if you're trying to do the exercises and you're saying the things wrong when you do the exercises, then that may be a habit that you have to correct once you actually go through it and listen to the exercises. But the bottom line is there's really no rules, um, with the exception of just do what I recommend on the plan and do that in whatever way that feels good for you. So if you're a person like me who prefers to do the exercises first and then listen to the audio component of the book, then do that. If you prefer to listen and then do the exercises, do that. Whatever it is you do, just do what's comfortable for you. At the end of the day, this is your plan and this is your journey, and I can't dictate how you learn because I don't really know you personally. Now, that said, there is a problem with doing the audio version of the book first, and it has to do with the editing of the audio version of the book. Now, the audio version of the book is definitely not perfect. In fact, I remember that I wrote a review of the audio version of the book, and I gave the audio version of the book 3 stars. In my review, my biggest complaints were the native speaker is straight monotone. Like he is very boring to listen to. There's no energy coming from him. The narrator, the English narrator, she has great energy, but the native speaker, you just have to make it through his readings because they're boring. But more important than the native speaker being boring, the editing is not perfect in the audio version of the book, at least not when I had went through the book. If you go through the book, you're gonna start hearing places where some of the material is muffled. Like it literally sounds like someone put a pillow over the speaker and it cuts out for a few seconds. So that's one thing. But the biggest thing to note is that once you get to chapter 6 will be fine. But after chapter 6, there's this practice chapter. And that practice chapter comes before chapter 7. But what happens in that practice chapter is that you're given exercises that actually come from chapter 7 and chapter 6. So imagine what I said. There's chapter 6, then there's practice chapter, then there's chapter 7 for the audiobook. But if you listen to the audio version first, like you do the practice in between chapter 6 and chapter 7 first, but you have not listened to chapter 7 or you did not do the exercises for chapter 7 first, then you're going to come to a point where you're asked questions about chapter 7 without having seen it. And that's going to be very frustrating if you're not aware of what's happening there. So make sure you keep that in mind. If you are going through the audio version of the book first, when you get to that practice section, you should probably stop it, do chapter 7 first, and then go back to that practice chapter. And then the last thing I would say about the audio version of the book, once you get past chapter 7 and you're in chapter 8, it seems like the book has a bunch of scratches, kind of like if you ever had a CD. I don't know how old you are, but if you ever listened to a CD, like CDs used to scratch. And so in chapter 8, there's a lot of scratching in the audio. So it's not very pleasant to hear when the audio is going in and out. So that's the other thing that you have to note about the audio version of the book. So keep that in mind if you're going through the audio version of the book first, or even if you're doing the exercises and then the audio version. It's not perfect, but the material is still there. Now, the last thing I will say about the book, and someone had a concern, and it was the same concern that I had about the book the first time I went through it. So I showed in the past, in past videos, like how much highlighting I did in this book. There's so much highlighting in this book. And that's because there is a lot of vocabulary in this book. I mean, there's a sheer, like, it's overwhelming. It could be overwhelming. And I remember going through the book the first time myself. I literally was cursing at the book and complaining to my wife about all the vocabulary. I'm like, why do I need to know all these nationalities? Why do I need to know the inner parts of the body? Like this is stupid. This is crazy. So not only that, like there's so many verbs. Like I believe there's over 100 verbs just in the first section of the book. Like there's a lot of vocabulary. So how do you handle that? Like how do you handle this sheer amount of vocabulary coming at you? Do you try to remember it all or what? Well, here's what I recommend. As you go through the book, at least the first time, go through it for understanding of the language. Like you have 30 chapters to go through, and there's a lot of material that's going to come at you. But one good thing about that vocabulary in this book is that it's used over and over again for the most part. The vocabulary that's really important. So the verbs, for example, you will see all the different congregations of the irregular verbs and other verbs that are just frequently used verbs. And so what you would do is again, read the chapter, go through the material, try to remember as much of the vocabulary as you can. But the first time through the book, don't make that your focus. Make the focus just understanding the language. And as you do the exercises, something strange will happen. Eventually, you will start filling in the blanks and recognizing that you actually did understand or did remember the vocabulary that you thought you didn't remember. But remember, I believe I shared with you all that I went through this book more than once. And so now I'm pretty confident that I know 90% of the vocabulary that comes up in this book. And so you have to remember that when you're learning a language, I don't believe it's like people say where you just learn it in 30 days and then all of a sudden you know it. Like all of that depends on your level of understanding of the material that you read, how much you remember, and so many other variables, like how often you study it and all of that stuff. So don't worry about it. Enjoy the process. Enjoy just reading and learning and filling the exercises every day. Just make it part of your daily routine. And then the second time you go through the book, again, it's going to be easier than the first time you go through the book. And if you decide to go through the book a third time, it's going to be easier than the first and the second time. So it's a process, and you have to just keep going and don't give up, because that's what a lot of people do. And if you want to stand out from the other people who give up, then you just have to keep going. I promise it's going to work. With that said, that's all I wanted to say and share about the book, and I hope it all made sense. And if it helped you, give this video a like. And until next time, peace.